Hello, I'm back and I realized, I don't know if you were with me in the last video, but it cut off at the battery died, and sometimes I catch it and sometimes I don't, so I apologize if the video ever ends abruptly. That's because the time was up and it just goes off. Sometimes I catch it and I try to go back. So I was still on the active imagination, and let's continue on from there. Step 1, which is the invitation of how you invite the active imagination process to come forth, to begin getting into that space where you can visualize something and really start to get the story going. So here we go. In this form, which is talking about the fourth form, which is dialoguing with dream figures, active imagination becomes a valuable addition to your dream work. It allows you to go to a dream where you have been left hanging, where the situation has not been resolved, to develop the inner situation that the dream presented. It allows you to continue the story, go through the next step the dream is leading toward, and bring the whole issue to a resolution. When you find yourself wanting to do active imagination but can't seem to get started or find a starting point, go to a recent dream. Not only will it help you to get the active imagination flowing, it will transform your relationship to your dream and your relationship to the inner person, because you will be adding your conscious participation to the dream. Active imagination illustrations. Before we move on to the second step, I will give you 3 examples of experiences in either extending a dream with active imagination or using a dream person for dialoguing. Our first example comes from Jung. This was one of the earliest uses that he made of active imagination. Jung discovered the seeds of some of his most profound and far-reaching insights into the nature of the psyche by going to an inner person whom he called Philemon, and who first appeared in a dream, and doing active imagination with him. Soon after this fantasy, and then here's the excerpt, from Jung. Soon after this fantasy, another figure rose out of the unconscious. He developed out of the Elijah figure. I called him Philemon. Philemon was a pagan and brought with him an Egypto-Hellenistic atmosphere with a Gnostic correlation. His figure first appeared to me in the following dream. There was a blue sky like the sea, covered not by clouds but by flat brown clods of earth. It looked as if the clouds were breaking apart and the blue water of the sea were becoming visible between them. But the water was the blue sky. Suddenly there appeared from the right a winged being sailing across the sky. I saw that it was an old man with the horns of a bull. He held a bunch of 4 keys, one of which he clutched as if he were about to open a lock. He had the wings of a kingfisher with its characteristic colors. Philemon and the other figures of my fantasies brought home to me the crucial insight that there are things in the psyche which I do not produce, but which produce themselves and have their own life. Philemon represented a force which was not myself. In my fantasies I held conversations with him, and he said things which I had not consciously thought, for I observed clearly that it was he who spoke, not I. He said I treated thoughts as if I generated them myself, but in his view, thoughts were like animals in the forest. It was he who taught me psychic objectivity, the reality of the psyche. Through him, the distinction was clarified between myself and the object of my thought. Psychologically, Philemon represented superior insight. He was my mysterious figure. At times, he seemed to me quite real, as if he were a living personality. I went walking up and down the garden with him, and to me, he was what the Indians call a guru. 2 interesting thoughts with that one. The first is a thought about understanding that every thought that you think is not your own. Every thought that you think does not have to be followed down a train of, lost in thought. You have to kind of separate. Unless you're consciously aware of your thoughts, there's so much information that we're inundated with on a daily basis. Those of us that still partake in watching TV, those of us that still listen to very suggestive music, or movies or anything, that we surround ourselves with constantly, and it's not, sometimes that stuff will creep in there, and not every thought you think is your own. So analyze, check your premises, think, who's thinking that? Is that my thought? Is that something I wish to think? Because thoughts are, they're chargers, they're signals, and they manifest. They create. Thoughts create, so you want to be careful what you're thinking, that you are thinking. And the second piece was the realness of Philemon, I think it was. Oh, I actually lost my thought with that one, sorry, so I'll just continue. There is a seemingly endless variety of relationships that can be established with a dream person if you will go to them in active imagination. And you can confirm in your own experience that you begin to change inwardly in response to the dialogues and experiences that you pass through with these inner persons. If there's a terrible conflict with a dream figure during your dream, you can suspend many sessions of active imagination with that person. You can spend many sessions of active imagination with that person, working out the conflict and reaching an understanding. If, like Jung, you discover a wise prophetic old man or a woman in your dream, you can go back to that dream person regularly to ask for wisdom and counsel. A long time ago, I dreamed that I was sitting in my study, behaving myself and doing whatever one does in one's study. Suddenly a lion walked in. It terrified me. I tried everything I could to get the lion out of the study. I pushed, I ordered, I demanded, I made a big noise that frightened me more than the lion. I twisted his tail, but there the dream ended. I was still terrified and the lion would not leave. As you can see, this is a completely unsatisfactory conclusion for a dream. There was no resolution of the problem. So I took the dream into active imagination. In my imagination, I started up exactly where the dream had left off. I immediately got frightened all over again. The hair went up on the back of my neck and chills went down my spine, all of which means that it was a high-quality active imagination. I was there in my feelings. It felt to me as though I had a physical lion in my physical study and my head might be bitten off. My heart pounded. I shook and I broke out in a cold sweat. I did 4 different sessions of active imagination on that dream before it dawned on me that the lion was not hurting me. One is so stupid with one's own interior things. Anyone else would have said within 30 seconds, look, the lion isn't hurting you. Why twist his tail? Maybe he has something to say. Maybe he is an important part of you that you need to accept. But it took 4 sessions of imagination dedicated to trying to get rid of the creature before it dawned on me that he probably belonged with me and I needed to integrate him into my life. The imagination was so strong that I couldn't cut it off. Every time I went into my study to work, the imagination would start up again, and there would be the spirit lion prowling around the study. Every time I tried to do some work at my desk, he would come over and lick me, sniff me at the typewriter, or growl out the window and distract me. I started talking with him. Who are you? What are you here for? Look what you're doing to my study. I can't get any work done around here with you breathing down my neck. Anyway, you scare the hell out of me, even if you are a dream lion. Why don't you go outside and find some other lions or something? Lions don't belong in the house, and they don't belong in my civilized, respectable daily routine. I got used to him, but it took many weeks for me to come to some kind of accord with that interior content in myself that chose to portray itself as a lion. It is a very powerful, even frightening part of myself, so the more clearly I saw who that was, what part of me it was, the more scared I became at the implications. It took a lot of work for me to be able to face it. Finally, after many sessions of active imagination, one day the lion went over to a particular place in my study, sat down on his back haunches, and became a bronze sculpture. In his right paw, which he held out, was a book, and I read the most amazing things in that book. He has stayed there ever since. Occasionally, I go in imagination back to that place in the interior study to see if he's still there. He is, and the book is still there, always opened to a page with important information. Let me check the video time. Hold on one second. Chillin'. Alright, continuing on. Our final example in this chapter is the experience of a young woman who had a short dream about her husband and her brother. Since the dream left her hanging, so to speak, she decided to go to the person in the dream in active imagination and see if she could get the issues ironed out. With this example, we have the advantage of a transcript of the actual word-for-word dialogue that she did in her imagination. You will recognize this dream. It is the dream we first looked at in this book. We have already seen how the dreamer drew meanings from it through dream work. Now we also see how she used her dream to launch active imagination. The dream. I'm looking for my car keys. I realize my husband has them. Then I realize that my brother has borrowed my car and has not returned it. I see both of them and I call to them. They do not seem to hear me. Then a disheveled young man, like a renegade, gets into my car and drives off. I feel extremely frustrated, helpless, abandoned, upset. Note from the dreamer. I decided to do an active imagination because there was no resolution to the problem in the dream. And I always feel that that is a clear invitation from the unconscious to work with imagination. I felt the dream showed I was in a bad relationship to my inner masculine side. I had no communication. My collective way, the car, was being taken away, but there was no solution to the problem. I set up dialogue with the three men in the dream, but I changed the images so they wouldn't look exactly like my physical brother and husband, so that the imagination would not work magic on the external husband and brother. I dialogued with the archetypal generic husband and brother. Why are you doing this to me? To H and B, and H and B are the husband and brother. You've both broken promises. H and B, both silent. They won't talk. The renegade turns its back on me and faces away. Please, why won't you talk to me? Please speak. Why did you take my car away in the dream? Why did you leave me alone? What is going on? H and B, they look at each other. I see the husband has the keys in his hand. You were ignoring me, yet you've clearly done something to get my attention. What do you want? Long silence. Please don't ignore me. It hurts. I need to talk with you. You have been ignoring us. Besides, you don't need the keys. I can't drive without them. Brother, you don't need a car. I don't understand. H tosses the keys to B and says, if you're going to act like Superwoman all the time, why don't you fly where you need to go? Now I feel very wounded. I begin to understand his meaning. I have been far too busy trying to do too much, inflated. I feel how sad, empty is more apt. I feel how sad, empty is more apt. Empty I am beneath all this striving. The husband says, you act as if you don't need us, as if you don't need anything. That's why we have been so distant. I can see how I've been alienated from both of you. No wonder I've become so strained lately. I'm sorry. I let myself get overwhelmed by work and I went completely unconscious. Now I have a sense of who the renegade is. He turns to face me. Speaking to renegade, you are the runaway energy in me. You say yes to tasks that seem reasonable, productive, worthwhile, and by an arbitrary standard, they may be so. But they are not what I want. I see now. You are the one who gets in the car and just drives off with me. You set up all this forward motion, but it isn't what I want, and it isn't what is right for me. As I look at all I'm doing, I see that the writing project can wait, and I no longer want to teach the continuation class. The other classes are fine, but one less will make my life my own again. The renegade says, the writing project is a good one. It could be significant to other people. Besides, you have already said you were interested. I made no commitments. You make it seem as if waiting would be catastrophic. It isn't so. Renegade says, well, omitting the class will disappoint the students. They specifically requested it in order to help with the field placements. You will lose credibility if you back out. Many people depend on me, but I am not indispensable. Someone else can teach it. The students will learn from having another point of view. I am feeling increasingly more balanced, more myself. I don't like the anxiety of refusing these requests, yet there are obviously more demands than can be met. I dislike even more the feeling of too muchness, of doing things unconsciously, of feeling disconnected and automatic. Look, I like my work, but when I allow you to dictate to me, I feel less and less joy in what I do. I forgot to notice the difference between what is practical and what holds meaning. I am not backing out. I am waking up. I am choosing. I hear a group of starlings in the acacia tree outside my window. Their voices are distinct and fresh. I hadn't noticed them before. How could I have missed it? I fall into quietness and thank the starling for calling me to attention. After some time, I note that the three figures before me have been transformed. There is one man, a beloved figure from former dreams. We are attuned in the silence and remain so for some time. This example shows us how a short, unresolved dream situation can be transformed by extending it into active imagination. How quickly and directly she found the main application of the dream. By going to the three dream figures and asking them to talk with her, she effectively started the dream all over again at the point where it left off. But the dream took on a new element at the point because she added her conscious participation to it. Instead of merely watching the dream, she entered into it and began to play a conscious role in it. Even with the advantage of knowing with whom she wanted to speak, she still had some difficulty with the invitation. At first, these dream characters didn't want to speak, but by persistently keeping after them and letting them know that she was ready to talk and listen, she pulled them out of their resentment and got the dialogue going. From these examples, please find encouragement to go to your own dreams and use them as starting points for making your invitation to the unconscious. Use this method as a way of continuing your own dream until you make the evolution and gain the consciousness that is yours. I think the battery is about to die, and that is all of this chapter. We'll come back with step 2, the dialogue.